Good morning, guys. So today for our read aloud, we're going to continue reading Lines at Lunchtime by Mary Pope Osborne. And we're going to pick up with chapter 3. So if you remember in chapters 1 and 2, we found out that Jack and Annie met with Morgan Le Fay in their magic treehouse, which whisked them away to Africa. And we already talked about the fact that we're going to be doing some research on Africa, or maybe some of the animals that could be found there, some of the different places that are found within that continent. So just keep in mind that you're thinking about something that you might want to research and find out a little bit more on. But in chapter 3, where we left off, I have a feeling we're going to get into a little bit more action because chapter three's title was Disaster. So let's jump in. Come on, Jack, Annie called. She was almost to the river. Just a minute, he shouted. He wanted to study the giraffes and zebras. He pulled out the Africa book and found a picture of giraffes. He read, "The giraffe is the tallest animal in the world. Its legs alone can be 6 feet tall, and its hooves can be as big as dinner plates." See that simile there? The giraffe has a very powerful kick, which makes it dangerous to attack. For this reason, lions tend to avoid giraffes. So I know that we also were talking in the last two chapters about where the lions might be, and a lot of you made some great predictions. And maybe this is another reason why we don't see them, because they actually are a little bit fearful or scared of the giraffes. Jack pulled out his notebook and wrote, "Notes on Africa. Lions avoid giraffes." He turned the page and read more. Zebras live in family groups. As no two zebras have exactly the same pattern of stripes, every baby zebra must learn its own mother's pattern. Jack studied the zebras, trying to see their different patterns, but in the hazy afternoon light, all the stripes made him dizzy. He blinked to clear his head, then read more. Zebras are the first to cross the river because they eat the coarsest grass. After they've thinned down the top layer, the wildebeest arrive and eat the next layer. They prepare the grass for the gazelles who come last. Wow, thought Jack, each animal depends on the one that goes before. He wrote, "Animals all connected." So, just a reminder, you're going to be doing some research just like Jack is. And so, a lot of times when we're taking notes on our research, we have to remember that we normally do not write in complete sentences when we're taking notes. We're just jotting down some information. And you can see that here, where he just kind of is just writing broad topics or just little jots that will help him remember important facts. Jack heard Annie shouting from the riverbank. "Jump, beast, jump! You can do it! Don't be afraid, come on!" He looked up. Annie herself was jumping as she called to the wildebeest. Jack sighed. "I better stop her before there's trouble," he thought. He put away the Africa book and his notebook. Then he jogged toward the river. His pack was heavy and lumpy, bumping against his back. He'd forgotten to take out the jar of peanut butter and the loaf of bread. Jack decided to leave them at the treehouse. He turned to go back, but just then Annie's shouting stopped. Jack looked to the river. She had vanished. "Annie?" he called. No answer. Where was she? "Annie!" Jack shouted. She had completely disappeared. "Oh man," said Jack. Their trip had barely begun and already disaster had struck. He forgot about the stuff in his pack and just ran as fast as he could. He wove his way between the grazing zebras and giraffes as he raced to the river. "Help!" called Annie. So, yikes. We talked about there being a disaster, but this sounds like it could be pretty bad. So right now is when I would have you guys stop and make a prediction. Just kind of think to yourselves for a minute, what might Annie have gotten herself into? Okay. And then it says on page 16, we learned that, and I used a quote since this is a direct citation from the book, and it says, "No two zebras have exactly the same pattern of stripes." So I was wondering what unique feature, so what is something that we have that is unique to us or just for us, what unique feature do humans have that is similar to this? So think about that and then answer in a complete sentence. Chapter 4 is called Mud Bath. Jack looked over the edge of the riverbank. Annie had fallen into a pool of mud near the water. The thick black mud was up to her chest. "I slipped," she said. "It feels like quicksand." Jack threw down his pack and got on his knees. "Be careful," said Annie. "Don't slip too." Jack pointed to a tangle of old tree roots sticking out of the bank. "Grab those," he said. Annie reached for the roots. "Too far," she said, breathing hard. "I'm sinking." She was sinking. The mud was up to her neck. Hold on! Jack looked around wildly. He saw a fallen tree branch near the bank. He raced to it, picked it up, and carried it back to Annie. Only her head and arms stuck out of the mud now. Jack held out the branch. Annie grabbed it. Hold tight, said Jack. I'll drag you over to the roots. He started pulling on the branch. I'm still sinking, Annie wailed. The mud was up to her chin. Can you imagine how scared she must be? Come on, said Jack. You can do it. I know you can. Try, try. Just then, Jack heard a splash. Some onomatopoeia there. He looked up. On the other side of the wide river, a wildebeest had jumped into the water. Another jumped, then another. They were headed right toward Jack and Annie. Hold on tight, said Jack. He pulled the stick again, and Annie moved a tiny bit. Hey, Jack, on the moon it felt like I weighed 10 pounds, said Annie, and in this mud it feels like I weigh a ton. Concentrate, Annie, said Jack, trying not to slip down the bank. I am. The lead wildebeests were halfway across, swimming toward them. Many more wildebeests were jumping into the water. It's now or never, said Jack. He took a deep breath. He pulled really hard. Just then, a shadow passed over them. Jack looked up. Uh-oh, he said. A huge vulture circled overhead. He thinks you're near the end, said Jack. Oh, get out of here, Annie shouted at the vulture. I'm fine. In a burst of fury, she let go of the branch. She lunged for the roots. She grabbed them. Yes, cried Jack. Pull, pull. Slowly, Annie pulled herself out. She was covered with the black mud from head to toe. Jack helped her onto the bank, getting mud all over himself. See? Annie shook her fist at the vulture. I'm fine. Now beat it. But the giant ugly bird still circled. Come on, let's get away from him, said Jack. He pushed his glasses into place. Rats, he said. Now his glasses were all muddy. He tried to clean his hands on the grass. Oh no, shouted Annie. Jack turned to her. The wildebeest will get stuck in the mud hole, she cried. She waved her arms at the wildebeest struggling to swim across the river. Not here, she shouted. Not here. But the frantic swimmers kept coming. So a couple of things before we move on is that, I don't know if you know this, but when a vulture sees that an animal or something is near death, it starts to circle around waiting for it to die. So it was really worried. It was really thinking that Annie was near the end. So that's why she was telling it, I'm fine. But there was a lot of adventure that happened in that book. So it says, there was a lot of action in the last 2 chapters. What were some of the disastrous things that happened? So disastrous is a form of that word disaster. So what were some of those like really exciting or like dangerous things that happened? There were 3 that I could think of. Then you're going to make a prediction as to what you think might happen next. Think about what might happen with the wildebeest. Do you think they'll get stuck? Think about what might happen with Jack and Annie. So that's your reader's workshop task for today. And then you have another journal writing with a write-on activity. And this one asks you to think of what your life is like right now and to just make a list of positives and negatives. So I kind of set it up for you and said, what are some things you like and dislike about being home? So in this column, if you click on it, a text box will pop up. If I were you, I would just click after and maybe just use like little dashes and type some of your things that you do like about being home, and then some of the things that you do not like about being home. Okie dokie. Can't wait to see your work today.